The autumn had come early to Ashwick that year, and Corlin had noticed because the leaves had turned before he'd gotten around to caulking the gap under the workshop door. He kept meaning to. He'd noted the gap in July. He had the caulk. He had the time, technically, in the way a man who lives alone always has time. Great unstructured swaths of it, uncommitted and leaking away like water through loose boards. He just hadn't done it. Maren would have made him do it in August. He poured 2 cups of tea before he'd registered what he was doing, filled both from the iron kettle, set one on her side of the table, and stood there for a moment looking at it before he picked it back up and poured it out. 3 years of this, 3 years, and his hands still remembered the old arithmetic. He was a carpenter by trade, had been since his father showed him how to read the grain of a board at age 11. There was something in the work he still found useful, the predictability of it. Wood told you things if you paid attention. It had lines, tendencies, places where it would split and places where it would hold. It didn't ask you to explain yourself. It didn't require conversation. You could go a whole day in the workshop, head down, hands moving, and the only sound would be the plane and the chisel and the soft fall of shavings, and by the time the light shifted from gold to grey, you had built something, and the building of it was a reason to have gotten up. He had moved to the edge of town after Maren died. Not dramatically. He hadn't sold the house in the centre exactly. He'd rented it to a young family and built himself a smaller place on the forest margin, where the trees started and the town effectively gave up on itself. He'd told himself it was practical. More land, quieter, better for a workshop. All of this was true, and none of it was why. The town let him go without much fuss. Corlin had always been one of those men who occupied their space without announcing it, who helped when asked and left when the helping was done, who did not particularly require being seen. Ashwick was a market town. It had a rhythm of transactions and gossip and small seasonal crises, and he had been part of that rhythm for 43 years, and now he was slightly outside of it, which suited him. He could go to market on Tuesdays and Fridays and speak to enough people to remember how and come home to the silence he'd constructed with some care. The workshop was the center of it. 12 by 18 feet, smelling of pine resin and the linseed oil he used on the tools. He made furniture, mostly. Chairs, tables, the occasional cabinet, and repairs on anything else that came his way. He was good, and the work was steady, and sometimes it was almost enough. There was a set of chisels on the wall that he hadn't touched in 8 months. Not because they were bad tools. They were the best he'd ever owned. A birthday gift from Maren the year before she got sick. The handles fitted to his hand so precisely they felt like part of his arm. He used other chisels now. Not out of grief exactly, but because the other ones were fine and these were particular, and he was not yet ready for particular. He'd fixed Torrin Holt's cart wheel that September morning without being asked. The boy was 16, slight, standing in the lane looking at the cracked hub with the particular paralysis of someone who doesn't know how to assess damage and is afraid to look stupid asking. Corlin had walked over, looked at it, said, "Half an hour," and done it. Torrin had stood nearby the whole time, wanting to be useful, not quite knowing how. Corlin had handed him pieces to hold when there were pieces to hold. The boy left without saying much, and Corlin hadn't expected anything, and the exchange had the brief clean quality of a thing done because it was there to do. He went to bed that night with a new silence settling over the house the way it always did. Not uncomfortable, exactly, but not the silence of absence either. More like the particular quality of a held breath. The house was full of small Marin-shaped spaces that he'd gotten used to stepping around. The empty chair, the kitchen window she'd always stood at, the hook by the door where her coat had hung. He'd taken the coat down after the first year. The hook was still there. He'd found her at dawn. He kept 3 traps along the forest margin, mostly for rabbits, checked them every few days out of habit rather than need. The morning was cold and grey, frost on the grass, his breath visible in the dim light under the trees. He heard her before he saw her. Not a sound exactly, more a quality of attention in the air, the sense that something nearby was awake and watching. She was against the roots of a great oak 20 feet off the path, and his first thought was that she was dead. His second thought, a fraction of a second later, corrected the first. Dead things didn't breathe like that. She was enormous. He'd known orcs existed. Everyone in Ashwick knew, the same way they knew about the forest beyond the forest, present at the edge of things, acknowledged but rarely examined. He'd seen 1 or 2 at the furthest market fairs, distant and deliberate, and had formed no particular conclusions. He was forming them now. She was well over 6 feet, broad-shouldered in the way a person becomes when strength is a tool rather than an ambition. Her skin was the dark grey-green of a river stone in low light. Her hair, black, coarse, still braided in what had been a precise military plait, though it was half unraveled now, was matted on one side with dried blood. Her tusks were not large, and curved upward with the natural elegance of something that had never thought about being elegant. Her ears came to points. Her right thigh was wrapped in moss and bark strips. The wrapping was skilled. He could see that, the work of someone who knew how to field dress a wound, who had done it before. But the edges of the moss were dark, and there was a smell he recognized from when his neighbor's horse had split a fetlock and the vet had come too late. She was watching him with total attention. Her eyes were a dark amber, and they moved through the space around him with the quality of someone assessing exits. Even now, exhausted, injured, whatever she was, her eyes were doing the work of someone who'd spent a long time staying alive in difficult places. He stood very still. He was a carpenter. He knew what wood looked like when it was about to break. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said. It was a stupid thing to say. He knew that as it left his mouth. She was an orc woman 6 inches taller than him and twice his weight, and he was a middle-aged man with a walking stick and a canvas bag containing 2 snares and some dried meat. But it was the first true thing he could think of, and it came out. She didn't respond. Her eyes tracked to his hands, his walking stick, the bag, back to his face. "Your leg is infected," he said. "I know." Her voice was low and rough, accented in a way he couldn't place. She said it without particular inflection, as if she were noting the weather. "How long?" 3 days. He looked at the wrapping. 3 days of that, alone, in the forest, in autumn. He looked at her face, the grey pallor under the dark skin, the particular stillness of someone who had put most of their available energy into appearing stable. "I have supplies at my house," he said. She said nothing. Her eyes didn't change. "It's 3 miles. He watched her take this in, watched her do the arithmetic. 3 miles on that leg, 3 miles of forest road and open field, and then the edge of a town she didn't know. He watched her arrive at the conclusion that the arithmetic didn't work. "I cannot walk it," she said. Not a question. Not particularly self-pitying. Just the statement of a fact she'd been sitting with for however long she'd been propped against this oak. He considered this for a moment. He considered the infection and what happened after infections reached a certain point. He considered the walk home and the equipment he had and what was physically possible. "I'll carry you," he said. She looked at him. There was a pause. 1 beat, 2 beats. And then she laughed. Not fully, not warmly, but the laugh was real, an involuntary escape of sound that contained genuine disbelief. "You," she said, "are too small." She looked him up and down with the precision of someone who had spent a career assessing load-bearing capacity. "Your back will break." "Probably not," he said. "Certainly not is different from probably not. I'll manage." She was looking at him the way you looked at something that might be a threat, but might also be a very strange joke. He crossed the distance between them and crouched down beside her, not touching anything yet, and looked at the leg. The smell was worse up close. The heat coming off the wound was visible in the cold air. "Get on my back," he said. "Put your weight forward, not sideways. Try not to move the leg." "I told you." "I heard you. Get on." There was another silence. He waited. He was good at waiting. He'd spent 3 years learning patience in all its forms. She moved. Slowly, with the controlled deliberateness of someone managing significant pain, she shifted her weight. He braced. When she settled onto his back, and it was not unlike having a small house settle onto his back, he breathed through it, found the balance, adjusted. He stood up. He felt her go completely still with surprise. Then he walked. He didn't know afterward what it was exactly that had made him do it. Not heroism, not any conscious decision toward virtue. More the particular quality of a problem presenting itself with only one solution, and the solution being unpleasant but clear, and so you did it. He had strong legs from 40 years of carpentry, carrying lumber, crouching, rising, the particular physics of building things. He was not young. He was not small exactly, just ordinary in the way most men were ordinary, without any special architecture for feats of strength. 3 miles. He walked. She was silent after the first half-mile. He had felt something in her, a tension, a waiting for the fall release by small degrees as the first mile passed. And he hadn't dropped her, or stumbled, or made the kind of sounds that indicated he was about to. By the 2nd mile, the silence between them had changed quality. He could feel her adjusting her weight slightly to help him, distributing it differently, small practiced shifts of someone who knew about loads and balance. By the 3rd mile, he was breathing hard, and his legs were speaking to him with some urgency, and he was sweating in the cold morning air, and she was completely quiet, and her grip on his shoulders had softened from the defensive grip of someone expecting to be dropped to something else that he didn't have a word for. He set her down in his kitchen and straightened up slowly and breathed. She was looking at him. He didn't look back. He went to the stove. He filled the kettle. "Sit in the chair," he said, "the one by the window. It's the right height." The infection was worse than he'd thought when he could look at it properly. He'd cleaned wounds before, Maren had specifically, which meant he'd watched her do it and handed her things and learned the general principles. He was not a healer. He was a man with a supply of clean rags, some spirits for disinfecting, a needle and thread, and the willingness to do necessary things without making them into a production. "I need to cut the wrap off," he said. "I'll tell you before I do each step." She was watching his hands. Not his face, his hands. "The spirits will burn. I know what spirits do." "Right." He looked at the wound. "The cut is deep. The edges are inflamed. I'm going to clean it first, then close it. It'll hurt. I've been hurt before." "I know." He looked up briefly. "I mean it as information, not reassurance." Something shifted very slightly in her expression. Not softening exactly. More a readjustment, a small recalibration. She said nothing. He worked for an hour. She made no sound. When he cleaned the infected tissue, her hands gripped the chair arms and her knuckles went pale, and she breathed through it in long, controlled intervals. But she made no sound, and she didn't pull away. He told her everything before he did it, not in a therapeutic way, not making it gentle, not performing bedside manner, but in the practical way of someone who understood that being touched unexpectedly was its own kind of violence, and that advance notice was a basic courtesy. When he'd finished and the wound was closed and wrapped properly in clean cloth, she looked down at it for a moment. Then she looked at him. "What do you want for this?" she said. He was washing his hands in the basin. He glanced at her. "Tea, eventually. Are you hungry?" She looked at him more carefully. He understood in a peripheral way that she was looking for the shape of a trap. He was not offended by this. It seemed like a reasonable thing to look for. He went to the stove. He made porridge. He set a bowl in front of her and stepped back to the other side of the kitchen where the window was and looked out at the yard. Outside, the last of the autumn leaves were coming down in the frost wind. He watched them. Behind him, after a pause, he heard the sound of a spoon against a bowl. She stayed. Neither of them discussed this. He put blankets in the corner of the main room, near the fire but not adjacent to the wall. He saw her locate the exits on the first day and made no comment about the positioning. The wound needed at least 2 weeks before she could walk on it, and by the time 2 weeks had passed, the question of whether she was staying had become irrelevant because she clearly was. Her name was Vreka. She offered this on the second day, flatly, without context. He said it back correctly on the first try, and she made a small sound that might have been approval. She was up before him every morning. He'd come down to find the fire already built up and wood brought in from the stack by the door, the stack that had been dwindling since August because he kept forgetting to refill it. By the 4th day, he stopped being surprised by this. By the 6th, it had simply become part of the architecture of mornings. She watched him work in the shop from the doorway at first, then moved her chair closer, then eventually sat in the workshop itself, near the south wall where the light was good. He didn't comment on this migration. He handed her things to hold when there were things to hold, the same way he'd handed things to Torrin Holt. She held them with the focused competence of someone who understood tools. They spoke rarely, and when they spoke it was in the transactional register of two people who needed to share a space. Where things were, what needed doing, whether something was finished. He thanked her for the wood. She said it wasn't difficult. He said that wasn't why he was thanking her. She went still for a moment at that. Then she went back to what she was doing. He noticed her looking at the chisels on the wall. Not obviously. She didn't reach for them or indicate an interest. But once, twice, she looked at them in the particular way of someone who recognized quality. He said nothing. She said nothing. But the next time he needed a fine chisel for a cabinet joint and reached for one of the ordinary set. He put it back and took down one of the good ones and worked with it and felt the familiar rightness of the fit and didn't make it into anything. On the 9th day, they reached for the same piece of sandpaper at exactly the same moment. His hand and her hand, arriving at the workbench from different angles at the same instant. They didn't touch. There was perhaps an inch between them. Neither of them moved for 1 beat, 2 beats, 3. The workshop had a particular quality in that moment, the quality of a held breath, or the second before wood decides which way to split. Then he took a different sheet. She took the one she'd reached for. They went back to work. He thought about it later, standing at the kitchen window in the evening, and he thought that what the moment had felt like strangely, was a language. Not words, not even a gesture, just a shared acknowledgement of something, neither defined nor denied, existing in the space between two people who had both gotten very good at keeping things quiet. It was on the 14th day that he saw what she was making. She had found a piece of grey sandstone on the forest margin somewhere. He hadn't seen her find it. It had just appeared on the shelf by the window one morning. She worked on it in the evenings, with a small knife she had had in her boot that she'd never mentioned, carving with the focused economy of someone doing a thing they'd done many times. He'd assumed, in the absent way you assumed things you weren't paying attention to, that it was some practical object, a handle, a plug for something. But on the 14th day, the afternoon light caught it at the right angle and he saw what it was. A dog. Or rather, a creature that was mostly dog. 4 legs, solid build, the particular weight of something that had been bred for war and then loved anyway. The carving was spare and exact. She'd gotten the set of the shoulders perfectly right, the way the animal's whole body expressed readiness without aggression. She didn't realize he was looking. She was thinking about the stone, turning it, deciding where the next cut went. Her face had changed completely from the face she wore when she was watching for something to be wrong. It was younger, or more simply itself. Her hands moved with the ease of someone doing something they understood entirely. He looked back at his work. He said nothing. She said nothing. That evening, the stone dog sat on the shelf by the window, and he set his tea down next to it, in the ordinary way of 2 objects that belonged near each other. He woke on the 11th night to hear her, once, cry out in her sleep. A sharp sound cut off immediately, the sound of someone who was used to silencing themselves, even in dreams. The house went quiet again. He lay in the dark and listened to the quiet, and after a while he heard the careful sound of someone moving through the house and the creak of the kitchen chair. He waited 10 minutes. Then he got up. She was sitting at the kitchen table with her hands flat on the wood. She was looking at the table. She didn't look up when he came in. He filled the kettle, put it on, found 2 cups. He'd only noticed what he was doing after he'd filled them both. He set one in front of her anyway. It happened on the 16th day, which was a Tuesday. She'd been in the workshop most of the morning, working on the sandstone figure while he fitted drawer slides for a commission. He'd been having trouble with one joint, a minor problem, a fraction of a millimeter of misalignment, and had been going at it with the inferior chisel because he hadn't wanted to make the decision about the other ones, which was a completely unreasonable way to approach a carpentry problem, and he knew it. He put the inferior chisel down. He reached up and took down one of the good ones, the fit of the handle, the immediate, precise cooperation of a well-made tool with a trained hand. He worked the joint. It seated perfectly. He heard her go still behind him. He didn't turn around. "That's better," she said. Her voice had a different quality in it. He couldn't name it. "Yes," he said. He worked in silence. The drawer slide seated. Perfect, clean. The kind of small achievement that nobody cared about but was, in the way of all small achievements, everything. When he turned around, she was looking at him. Not with the assessing look, with something quieter, something that had been in her face a moment before she'd managed to reassemble the usual arrangement. She looked away first. "Good chisel," he said. "Yes," she said. "It looks like it was made for you." It was. He put the chisel back on the wall with some care. He reached past her to set it in its place, and for 1 second they were closer than they had been in 16 days. He was aware of the warmth of her, the specific quality of her stillness, her breath, and the inch of air between his arm and her shoulder. and then the chisel was on its hook, and he was stepping back, and she was turning away toward the stone figure, and neither of them said anything about it, and the workshop breathed out again, and they went back to work. "Where I come from," she said, "we were told that humans were dangerous in the way that water is dangerous. Not because they meant harm. Because they didn't know their own weight." He considered this. "What did you learn instead?" Outside, the wind was doing something complicated in the eaves. The fire had burned down to orange coals. The kitchen had the particular warmth of a room in the middle of the night, when the heat has had time to settle into the walls. "That you know your weight very precisely," she said, "more precisely than we do." She looked at the table. "We are taught that we are strong. It becomes the first thing. Strength before judgment. I spent 30 years learning what that means." "What happened?" She was quiet for a long moment. Her hands were on the table. Still, not gripping, just resting, which was a different thing for her. He'd learned to read her hands. "There was a village," she said, "on the eastern border. We'd been fighting for the passes, the war chief and 3 other clans. The humans held the passes. We took them." A pause. "There were people in the village, not soldiers, farmers. A few craftsmen, children." She looked at the fire. "The order came down to leave nothing that could be used against us. That is what the order said. Leave nothing. I understood what it meant." "What did you do?" "I said no. I said it in front of the entire column." Her voice was flat and careful, the voice of someone who had told this to themselves so many times the narrative no longer had sharp edges. "I said there is no honor in this. Those were the words I used. No honor. In my language, that specific phrase. There is a weight to it that you don't have in yours. It's the weight of everything you were ever told you were." He said nothing. "The war chief removed my rank, my clan mark, my place in the line of blood." She touched her left arm, where he'd noticed at some point the faded outlines of something that had been deliberately scarred over. "I was given a day to leave. I was not given a direction." The fire shifted. A log settled. "She would have liked you," he said, without quite meaning to. Vreka looked at him. "My wife," he said. "Maren." It was the first time he'd said her name aloud, and he wasn't sure. "Months. She had a particular hatred of orders that required you to stop thinking before you followed them." He looked at his cup. "She taught school for children. She used to say that the beginning of every cruelty was someone deciding that a category of person didn't count. She had a lot to say about categories." "What happened to her?" "Fever, 3 winters ago." He turned the cup in his hands. "She was sick for 3 weeks. The second week she was unconscious most of the time, and I sat with her and I talked to her. I told her things I should have told her earlier, and things I'd been meaning to say, and things that I'd thought so many times I assumed she knew them without the saying." He looked at the coals. "I don't know if she heard any of it. The doctor said probably not by that point. I've decided he was wrong." Vreka looked at him. Her expression was difficult to read, which was different from having no expression. It meant he had learned that there was a great deal there, and she was deciding what to do with it. "In my language," she said quietly, "there is a word for that. For the things you say at a threshold, when you don't know if the person can hear. We believe they can. We believe that hearing is the last thing to leave." He didn't ask the word. He just sat with that. They talked for another hour about what they'd been taught and what they'd learned instead. She told him that she'd been taught humans built their houses too close together, that it was a sign of either trust or foolishness, and she'd come to think it was both, which was probably the most human thing she could say about humans. He told her that he'd been taught orcs didn't feel grief the way humans didn't form attachments to places and things, moved through the world without accumulation. He looked around his kitchen at the stone figure on the shelf, the 2 cups, the particular tidiness of a room that 2 people had been maintaining together without discussing who did what. She followed his gaze. She said nothing, but the corners of her mouth did something brief and precise. They stayed in the kitchen until the fire died entirely, and then they went back to their separate spaces, and the quality of the silence between them was different from how it had been. Aldic came on the 21st day. He was 62 and had been Corlin's neighbor in the center of town for 14 years before Corlin had moved to the margin. He had a broad, weathered face and the patient eyes of a man who had done a lot of looking at the world and had opinions about most of it. He'd come to Marin's funeral. He'd checked on Corlin in the months after, in the regular way of someone who took responsibility for the people near him. He was, Corlin had always thought, a genuinely good man in the limited and specific way that good men existed, meaning he was kind to people who were like him and uncertain about people who were not. He knocked at 9 in the morning, which was early. Corlin answered. He could see, immediately, that Aldic had been working up to this for some days. The set of his shoulders had the particular quality of a man who had rehearsed. "Corlin," he said. He looked past Corlin's shoulder, into the house. He'd been close enough to the market square to have heard, which meant he had had time to develop an opinion. "Aldic." Corlin stood in the door. "Come in if you want. I was making tea." Aldic came in. He sat at the kitchen table. He folded his hands. He looked at the stone figure on the window shelf with a particular look of a man cataloguing evidence. Vreka was in the workshop. Corlin had heard her go still when the knock came. He'd heard, in the quiet, the specific quality of her stillness. "People are talking," Aldic said. He said it in the gentle way of someone delivering news they wish they didn't have to deliver, which was its own kind of cruelty. "Torrin Holt saw her on the road last week. That's been going around." "I know." "Corlin." Aldic looked at him with something like grief in his face, and Corlin recognized that the grief was genuine, which made it harder. "I was there when Marin got sick. I know what this winter's been like for you, and I'm not saying she's done you harm. I'm just saying there are people who are afraid, and fear in people does things, and if you just..." "Just what?" Aldic was quiet for a moment. "Ask her to move on. Say you helped her. She's healed. It was a kind thing, and now she should go." "She was exiled," Corlin said, "for refusing to let her war chief slaughter a village of farmers. That's why she's here. That's who she is." Aldic opened his mouth and closed it. "She's been chopping my wood since she could stand on the leg. She rebuilt the hinge on the workshop door that I've been meaning to fix for 2 years. She doesn't take up noise or trouble. She minds her own business with more discipline than most people I've known." He looked at Aldic. "Tell me what I'm supposed to be afraid of. Specifically." The silence in the kitchen was careful. "It's not about fear," Aldic said, but something in his voice had shifted. "I think it is," Corlin said, not unkindly. "And I think it's the ordinary kind. Not the wrong kind, necessarily. Just the kind that needs to sit with something long enough to change shape." Aldic left after a while. He stood in the door for a moment before going, and he looked at the shelf again, and then he looked at Corlin, and he opened his mouth and said nothing, which felt more honest than anything he might have said. Corlin closed the door. He stood in the kitchen. After a minute, he heard Vreka come in from the workshop. She was walking on the leg now with only a slight shift in her gait. "I can leave," she said. Her voice was entirely level. "This evening. It wouldn't be—" "No," he said. She looked at him. "No," he said again, in exactly the same tone. The words sat between them. He went back to the stove and refilled the kettle, and after a moment he heard her sit down. They came at dusk 12 days later. 6 of them. He heard them before he saw them. The sound of more than one person on the lane, the particular quality of a group that had arrived at an agreement about what it was doing. He was at the workshop window. He saw them at the gate. He knew most of their faces. Bren from the mill. Oscar, the butcher's brother. Willa Thrace's eldest son, who was 20 and had the flushed look of someone who'd been talked into this. 3 others he knew by sight, but not name. He set down the planer. He felt, for a moment, the arithmetic. 6 of them, one of him, the various ways the evening could go. And then he felt something clarify in the way that things sometimes clarified in crisis. A narrow simplicity, everything that wasn't relevant falling away. He went to the workshop door. "Stay inside," he said. "Not to no one." A pause from inside. Then, "Call in." "I know," he said. "Stay inside." He went out the front. Bren stepped forward. He was a big man, red-faced, and his fear was plainly visible, which meant his temper was also plainly visible. "We want to talk to you," he said. "I can see that." Corlin stood at the gate. "What do you want to say?" "She's been here 2 months. 2 months of everyone in Ashwick wondering when something goes wrong. Wondering when the trouble starts." "What trouble?" Bren's jaw worked. "You know what kind." "I don't. Tell me." "She's a warrior. Exiled. No clan, no law over her. That's dangerous." "She was exiled," Corlin said, "for refusing an order to kill unarmed people." He looked at the group of them, one face and then another. "That is a statement of fact. I'm not asking you to like her or trust her. I'm asking you to be specific about what you're afraid of, because I've had 2 months of specifics and none of them have been dangerous. She's been trading at the Tuesday market for 3 weeks, and the worst thing that's happened is that she outbid Jarrett Moss for a bolt of canvas, which I understand was annoying for Jarrett, but not a danger to public safety." There was some stirring in the group. The young man from Willa Thrace's family had the look of someone who was beginning to wish he'd stayed home. "People don't want her here," Oscar's brother said. He sounded less convinced than when he'd arrived. "Some people," Corlin said. "She fixed old Hester Cray's cartwheel last week. Hester told me herself. Her exact words were, 'I don't care who fixed it. It's fixed.'" He looked at Bren. "I'm not asking for a verdict. I'm asking you to go home." They went. He stood at the gate for a minute after they'd gone. Then he turned around. She was standing in the workshop doorway. She was holding the stone figure in one hand. He didn't know if she had picked it up deliberately or without thinking. She was looking at him with an expression he couldn't fully read, and he'd been getting better at reading her, but this one was something he didn't have a name for yet. "They will come back," she said. "Yes. With more. Probably." She looked at him for another moment. Then she looked down at the stone figure in her hand, and she looked at it for a long time, and then she went back inside. He followed. In the kitchen, the fire was low and the room was warm, and she put the stone figure back on its shelf with precise, deliberate care. "In my language," she said, "to the shelf, or to the room, or to no one in particular, there is a difference between a person who stands with you because they need you to stand, and a person who stands with you because they have decided to." He said nothing. "You have decided to," she said. He went and built the fire up. Neither of them spoke again that evening, but the silence in the room had a weight and warmth to it, that silence in that kitchen had not had before. They came back on a Thursday, in the first week of November. More of them this time. He'd half expected it, had felt it building in the quality of glances at the Tuesday market, the way conversations went quiet in the wrong way when she passed. 9 this time. Bren again. 3 men he'd known for years who'd never been anything but polite to him and were not entirely comfortable now, which did mean they decided to leave. A woman he didn't recognize, tall, with the hard face of someone who'd lost something and decided to have feelings about who was responsible. And Herrick Dane, which was different. Herrick was the town's chief constable, a careful man who'd been doing this job for 20 years and didn't usually come anywhere that didn't require him legally. Herrick stepped forward. He had papers. Corlin. He had the careful voice of a man doing a job he wasn't sure he should be doing. There's been a petition filed, official complaint to the council about an unregistered presence. She's a person, Corlin said, not a presence. Herrick was unflappable. It was his main professional quality. I know you feel that way. The complaint has been filed and I'm required to investigate it. The petitioner, several petitioners, claim she represents a danger. What danger? Corlin set the axe down. He'd been splitting wood when they came. Specifically, in the documentation. Herrick glanced at his papers. There are concerns about the general category of Herrick. He looked at the constable. You've been doing this job for 20 years. You know the difference between a general concern and a specific one. I'm asking for the specific one. Behind him, he heard the workshop door. He didn't turn. He could feel her there. The particular weight of her attention, the quality of her being present in a space. He'd learned over 2 months to read it like weather, knowing when she was watchful and when she was settled. She was very still now. He could feel her watching. And he felt, in that moment, the entire arithmetic of it. 9 people in front of him, none of them unreasonable exactly. All of them afraid in the ordinary way that people were afraid of things they didn't understand. He felt his own heartbeat. He felt the particular cold of November in his hands and face. He felt the small sound of the wind in the workshop eaves and the specific silence behind him. He didn't move. She's been in Ashwick for 2 months, he said. He looked at Herrick first, then at Bren, then at the others. One at a time. In those 2 months, she has repaired 4 pieces of farming equipment for people who didn't ask her name first. She's been to market 6 times without incident. She helped Torrin Holt carry 2 loads of lumber when the boy was short-handed and didn't ask to be paid. She split 3 months of my firewood. She rebuilt the north workshop wall. He kept his voice level, not raised, not performing. You're telling me this person is a danger. I'm asking you to explain exactly how. Herrick was quiet for a moment. He was looking at his papers, but not reading them. Has she registered with the census office? He asked finally. She can do that tomorrow. Herrick folded the papers. He was a careful man. He put them in his coat. The petition requires a response. I can close it as unsubstantiated if there's a census registration and no further incidents. He looked at Corlin. That's not a verdict on anything. It's a procedure. I understand procedures, Corlin said. Bren made a sound. Herrick. Bren. Herrick turned to look at him with the particular quality of a man who had run out of patience at precisely the right moment. I've heard your concerns. I've filed them. The procedure exists for a reason. Let the procedure work. He looked back at Corlin. Tomorrow at the census office. Before noon. Before noon, Corlin said. The group shifted. The young man from the edge of it had already begun moving toward the gate. The others followed in the way of a thing that has reached the end of its momentum, not defeated, not satisfied, but receding. They left. He stood at the gate, listened to the sound of them on the lane. Then he turned around. She was standing 5 feet behind him. She was holding the stone figure, both hands loosely at her waist. Her face was, still wasn't the right word, because still implied the absence of something. What was in her face was the presence of something that she was being very careful with. Her eyes were different. He'd learned her eyes over 2 months, and these were different. Not softer, not stiller. Open. The word he found eventually was open, which was the word you'd use for a wound or a door, and which, in this context, felt like the most precise available. She had seen him stand there. She had seen men hold lines before. She had commanded them. She knew what courage looked like in soldiers. The forward-facing, armored, deliberate variety, the courage that wore its best face outward and kept the fear behind it. She'd seen it many times, and she had valued it the way a soldier valued it. She had not seen this before. This was a man without armor, without claim, without formal reason to be standing where he stood. A carpenter, a man whose back she had ridden for 3 miles through the frost because no other option had presented itself. A man who made tea for 2 out of habit and set the second cup out anyway. He had stood there, not for the sake of something abstract, not for principle, not for reputation, with his hands empty and his feet placed and his voice level. And the only thing he had argued with was the specific content of specific accusations, because that was who he was. A man who dealt in specifics. She felt something move in her chest. She had spent 4 months, 2 on the road before Ashwick, 2 in this kitchen, learning to want nothing from anyone, because wanting was a door you left open. And open doors were how things got in. That shouldn't. She had built the wall carefully. She had maintained it. She had been proud of the maintenance of it the same way she'd been proud of fortifications. The good ones you never had to fight from because the enemy never found the weakness. He had not attacked the wall. He had stood on the other side of it and refused to leave, which was different, which was she was holding the stone figure, and it had gotten warm from her hands, and she looked at it, and she looked at him, and the wall had not collapsed. 1 stone had moved, just 1, out of the way of a door she hadn't known was there. She didn't say anything. He came back through the gate, and she followed him inside. 5 minutes, 6. The fire was still from the morning. He built it up. She sat at the table. The stone figure sat between them on the wood. "You'll be at the census office tomorrow," she said. "We'll be at the census office tomorrow. You don't have to come." "I know." He looked at her. "I'd like to." She looked at the stone figure. She turned it slightly. Her hands were not entirely steady, and he saw this, and she saw that he saw it, and she didn't hide her hands. "In my language," she said slowly, "when someone does what you just did, not a warrior, not a soldier, just a person choosing to stay in a doorway, we have a word for it, the thing that the person does." "What is the word?" "Orath," she said. "It means to place yourself between, specifically to place yourself between someone and what would harm them when no law requires it, when nothing requires it except the decision to." He sat down across from her. "I'd like to know that word," he said. "Properly." She looked at him. Something in her face shifted again. A small change in the arrangement of someone who had been managing their expression for a long time and had, just this once, not quite managed it in time. "Orath," she said again. "Orath," he said. "Not quite right." She almost The beginning of something, a small involuntary movement at the corner of her mouth. She looked down at the stone figure. "The R is harder," she said. From further back. He tried again. She looked up. "Better," she said. He said it 3 weeks later. They were outside in the evening. She'd started coming out to the woodpile in the evenings, not to work, just to stand in the last light, which he'd learned was a thing she did when she was thinking. He joined her sometimes, not always. When he joined her, he didn't speak first. "You made my house feel like somewhere worth coming home to," he said. He was looking at the tree line. "I haven't had that in 3 years." He felt her go still beside him. "I'm not saying it to ask for anything," he said. "I just thought you should know it, because I'm not sure I would have known to say things like this if I hadn't spent 3 years practicing them to someone who couldn't hear." The sky was the deep blue of late evening, almost but not quite dark. One star visible. The last of the autumn leaves were down and the trees were bare, and the yard had the particular clean simplicity of late November, every line of the fence and the workshop and the wood stack clear against the sky. "Brekthal," she said. He looked at her. "It means—" She paused. "There is no clean translation. The closest I can manage in your language is the person who sees you clearly and does not flinch." Her voice was careful, quiet. "In my culture, it is not given easily. It is given to people who have demonstrated it, over time, with evidence." "Is that what I am?" She looked at the tree line. "It is what you are becoming. The form is progressive." She glanced at him briefly, with the particular quality of her dry humor, which had only appeared in the last month and was, he'd come to understand, one of the most honest things about her. In our language, many important things have progressive forms. It acknowledges that worth is demonstrated rather than declared. "Brekthal," he said. She looked at him. "Not quite. The KH is—" She showed him. A sound from the back of the throat. He tried it. "Closer," she said. He tried again. This time the laugh did come. Not big, quiet, low, contained, but actual. A real laugh, and it changed the light in her face the way a fire changes the light in a room. She looked startled by her own laugh. Then she looked at him. "Brekthal," she said again. Correctly, as if presenting the word for him to keep. "Brekthal," he said. Still not quite right, but closer. "You'll get there," she said. "I know," he said. She left in the second week of December. The message had come by way of a young orc man at the Tuesday market. Not threatening, just formal, a summons in the language of her people that she read twice and then folded and put in her coat without explaining. That evening she told him, "There is business with my former clan that I have been avoiding," she said. "It has stopped being possible to avoid it." "Is it dangerous?" She considered the question with genuine care. "It depends on the outcome of certain votes, which I cannot know until I am there." "How long?" 2 weeks. Perhaps 3. She left at dawn on a Wednesday. She'd packed the night before. She'd arrived with almost nothing and had accumulated almost nothing, which she understood now as a deliberate choice. She traveled light because traveling light was the posture of someone who had practiced not having things to lose. She stopped at the door. "The fire bank's on the left," he said. "You know where everything is?" She looked at him. "I know that," she said. "I built this fire." "I know, I'm saying it anyway." She looked at the shelf where the stone figure stood. She'd left it. She left. The house was large without her. This was not a quantifiable thing. She was one person. He had lived alone for 3 years. But it was true. The chair by the window was a different kind of empty from the chair that had been empty before she came. Before, The chair had been simply absent of a person. Now the chair was absent of a specific person, which was a different arithmetic entirely. He fixed the cork under the workshop door. It had been meaning to be done since July. He did it carefully, properly, the way he hadn't done it when he'd been going through the motions of a life, and he thought that this was probably something she'd notice when she came back. He also planted the herbs from the packet she'd left on the kitchen shelf. She'd bought them at the Tuesday market 3 weeks ago without explanation, and he'd left them where they were, respecting the fact that she had a plan that didn't require him to know about it yet. He read the labels on the seed packets and found a window box and planted them there where the morning light came in, and thought that they'd be showing green by the time she returned. He kept a fire banked on the left. He made tea in the evenings. He made 1 cup, which was correct, and he noticed the correctness with a gratitude that surprised him. She came back on the 19th day. He heard her at the gate. She came through the door with a particular quality of someone who has been traveling and is not yet entirely stopped. She looked at the kitchen, at the shelf where the stone figure still sat, at the window box where the first pale green shoots of the herbs were showing. She looked at him. "I knew you'd come back," he said. "You keep saying things like that," she said. "You keep coming back." She looked at the herb shoots for a moment. Then she looked around the kitchen, at the banked fire, the stacked wood, the particular tidiness of a room that had been maintained in a specific way, and her expression did the thing it sometimes did, the thing where the arrangement shifted and became briefly, precisely itself. "I spoke at the council," she said. She sat down. "About what I did, what I refused to do. I'd never spoken about it formally, because I'd left and speaking would have required me to stay, and staying was not possible at the time." "How did it go?" "A vote was taken." She looked at her hands. "I will not return to the clan. That door is closed and I don't want it open. But the vote," she paused. "The record of the exile has been modified. The charge is changed. It now reads, refusal to commit an unauthorized act of violence, which is different from mutiny." She looked up at him. "In the records, that is the difference between someone who broke a law and someone who refused to break one." He sat down across from her. "That matters." "It matters to some people," she said. "It will matter, eventually, to more." Neither of them spoke for a moment. Outside, through the window, the sky was the low, pale gray of winter afternoon. The herb shoots caught the thin light. "I planted them for you," he said. She looked at the herbs. "I left them for you." "I know." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked at the stone figure on its shelf. The kitchen had the warmth of a fire that had been banked and built back up, the kind of warmth that had time in it. She had met, at the clan council, 2 warriors who had remembered. Not everything, not with official sanction. But they had found her at the edge of the gathering, and they had used her formal name, not the exile's name, her name, the name of the rank she'd held. And one of them had said, "The eastern border. I was there. 2 days after. The village was still standing." She told him this in the kitchen the next evening. Her voice was careful, as always, when she was telling things that had sharp edges. "They didn't have to do that," she said. "It cost them nothing to not do it. It cost them a little something to do it. People surprise you sometimes." "Yes." She looked at the stone figure. "The war chief who gave the order is no longer war chief. There was a challenge last spring. He lost." She paused. "I don't know what that means. It may mean nothing. It may mean the beginning of something that eventually means something. I've learned not to expect too much of shifts that are this small." "But you watch them," he said. "Yes." She looked at him. "You watch small things." Small things are how everything starts. He thought about Aldec Mather, who had nodded to her at the grain stall, the chutes in the window box, which were a quarter-inch above the soil that morning, the particular way Torrin Holt had started asking her questions about the stone carving. Genuine questions, interested questions, the questions of someone trying to understand something rather than categorize it. "Yes," he said. In December, Hester Cray's granddaughter waved. Not at a particular moment, just on the lane, passing, the way children waved at things that interested them. Hester Cray herself called out a greeting from her gate, the generic greeting of someone who decided not to make a decision about something but had decided not to be unfriendly either, which was, as Vrecker observed, approximately correct progress. At the Tuesday market, the spice vendor, a man named Pelwick, who'd been steadfastly looking slightly past her for 6 weeks, left an extra portion in the package, as if by accident, without making eye contact. She noticed. She said nothing. He noticed that she'd noticed, and neither of them acknowledged it, and this was, somehow, the correct form of the exchange. Torrin Holt had started coming by the workshop again. He was a boy who liked to watch things being made. She'd started explaining occasionally what she was doing with the stone, the cuts and their purposes, and he'd started asking genuine questions. The questions of someone who wanted to understand the work rather than approve of the person doing it. Aldec came back in the middle of January. He came at a reasonable hour, and he didn't knock in the preparatory way of the previous visit. He had a jar of his wife's preserves and the slightly constipated expression of a man who had come to a conclusion he wasn't entirely comfortable with and had decided to act on it anyway. He set the preserves on the table. He looked at Vrecker, who looked at him. "My wife says to say she's sorry she hasn't come by," he said. "She's been meaning to. She wanted to say herself, but she's not." He stopped, tried again. "She's not good with unfamiliar things. Neither am I." He looked at the preserves. "But I've been thinking about what you said, Corlin. About specific things, and I've been watching, and the specific things are, I cannot find anything to object to specifically." There was a silence. "The preserves are quince," he said. "Lice made too much. It's not anything." Vrecker looked at the jar. "Tell Lise thank you," she said. He looked at her for a moment. Something in his face shifted. Not much, not dramatically. The particular small adjustment of a man who's been bracing for a door that turned out to be open. "I will," he said. He looked at Corlin. "The constable's office closed the petition. Herrick told me Tuesday." "I heard," Corlin said. Aldec nodded. He stood up. He put on his coat. At the door, he stopped. "That wall on the north side," he said, gesturing vaguely toward the exterior. "The mortar wants pointing before spring. I've got the mix if you need it." He left. The kitchen was quiet. On the shelf, the stone figure sat in the winter light. "Quince," Vrecker said, looking at the jar. "It's good," Corlin said. "She's been making it for 30 years. "Is it?" She looked at the jar with the particular quality of someone who was about to permit themselves to want something. "I've never had quince." He got 2 spoons. February, evening, the workshop. He was fitting a chair leg, the last piece of a commission that had taken longer than it should have, partly from distraction and partly because it was the kind of commission that required patience over speed. The joint needed to be perfect. He was not hurrying it. She was on the bench by the south wall working the stone. The warhound was finished. What she was carving now was smaller, more intricate, a second figure he hadn't asked about. He could hear the small sound of the knife and the particular quality of her attention. The fire was low. The light was the warm amber of a lamp in winter. "I sent a letter," she said. He looked up. "To the village," she said. "The eastern one. The one that was—" She looked at the stone. "I didn't know if there was a council or an elder or who received such things. I sent it to the village by name. I said what I had done and why, and I said that I know it doesn't change what happened that season, and I said that I intended—" She stopped. He waited. "I didn't know what to say I intended to do," she said. "I said that I intended to be worthy of the choice." He looked at her. She was looking at the stone, which she'd stopped carving and holding it instead. "That seems right," he said. She looked up at him. The workshop was very quiet. Outside, the first snow of the year had been falling since afternoon. Not heavy, just the preliminary snow, the suggestion of what winter intended. Through the small window it came down in the lamplight, each flake briefly visible and then gone. He turned back to the chair leg. "The joint." He tested the fit. "Perfect." "She would have liked you," he said. He hadn't planned to say it. It came out in the natural way of things that were true. "I've said that before." "You have," she said. "I know. I like saying it." There was a small sound from her side of the workshop. He didn't look up. He kept his eyes on the chair leg and the grain of the wood and the lamplight on the clean joint, and he was smiling in a way he hadn't recognized as a possibility for the last 3 years. She went back to carving. The small sound of the knife on stone resumed. Outside, the snow. Ashwick was still Ashwick. The market still ran on Tuesdays and Fridays, and the roads were still rutted in spring and frozen in January, and the people who'd been afraid were still, most of them, somewhere on the long road between where fear starts and where it ends, which is the honest description of where most people are, most of the time. The world didn't become kind. It became slightly more complicated, which was the shape that change actually came in. Not the clean break kind you told in stories, but the kind where small things accumulated over time until one day you looked up and the room had different air. The stone warhound stood on the kitchen shelf all winter. In March, she finished the second figure. Smaller, a human shape, seated, holding tools, and placed it next to the first. He didn't say anything about it. She didn't say anything about it. They both looked at the 2 figures on the shelf in the morning light, and the window box behind them where the herbs were coming in properly now, green and particular and specific, exactly the kind of small deliberate things that make a house into somewhere. He made tea. 2 cups, placed on the table in the ordinary way of mornings. She sat down across from him. Outside, the snow was going. The yard was the particular grey-brown of winter becoming something else. Not spring yet, not green, but the air had changed, the specific quality of it that told you the worst was clearly over. The cups steamed. The fire crackled. The 2 figures stood on the shelf side by side, holding the light.